Hey guys, my cat Lila is in a mood. She's knocking everything over, which will include my tripod. So I am sitting down for this one. So I thought I'd just go over a very simple thing that I learned. I know I went to years and years of therapy, but what I talk about this in one of my videos, that what got us, well, me off the therapy and then my husband off the therapy, and for me for sure off of after all the trauma we went through in our childhoods, but for me especially, my severe trauma in my childhood, what got me off my antidepressants and all of the meds and everything like that for psych stuff, which is hysterical because they go in with everything that's going wrong with me. They always ask you at the beginning of every single doctor's appointment, and they ask you all these questions about your health, and they're like, is your mobility this, and is this, and what would you rate your health on the scale of 1 to 10? And it's always like poor, 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 and then they're like, and your mental health, and they're like, how are you feeling? Is it, happy or sad? And I'm like, happy. And it's just like everything's poor except for my mental health, and I'm just like, well, and I know this has a lot to do with it. They're just like, you really defy the odds, and a lot of that is because I finally ran into, I did a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but eventually, like, I would get referrals if I found someone good or I found an organization that was good, then I would get referrals from them, and then I'd get referrals from them, and then I'd get referrals, and if I was doing really, really well, then if I ever saw something going wrong, like when I did, like I was doing good and I was off meds and stuff like that, and then I had a really bad car accident, the one where I rolled a bunch of times, I got PTSD, and that did stuff to me again, and I got on it. I was like, PTSD isn't going to run my life, and I got right back in there, like I would get myself, I saw it like the gym, but I also was really good about getting a good person, and that eventually led me to someone who just, an excellent person. And I want to talk to you about something they taught me that just blew my mind about parenting. And I really hope it helps you. It is something that I've talked to parents from all over the world, and they really liked this perspective. And it comes from an educator's perspective as well. I hope it helps you. It certainly rings true in today's world. So, as a parent, a lot of parents see their jobs as, it's switched. It used to be like raise my child to be a functioning adult in the real world, or raise my child to be happy. Now it's just raise my child to be happy. I think in a lot of ways it's raise my child to be a good reflection of me, or to make my world more comfortable. When you get down to it, every time you see a Dr. Phil episode, he's like, so you're doing this to make yourself more comfortable so that you downplay your confrontations with the child, which really, when you start doing that, you end up doing a lot more confrontations. If you confront the child early, you end up with you end up with very few confrontations with the child. If you confront early and at the right moments, then you end up having very few, there's very little conflict with children. But if you don't, then the conflict gets greater and greater and on a daily basis, and you get worn out. So, but the goal as a parent is, they think, when I talk to parents, I hear parents say, in America, if you look at this, I posted this before, the 2010 census data, and it was posting through like the richest family, on average, the wealthiest families in America. And I thought it was funny because I was watching when I saw the data, I was shocked by it because it was hysterical. There was an argument, you'll find it online, between Ben Shapiro and some African-American debaters. There was 4 people up on a stage, and they said, how can you say, it's not black versus white when the disparity of wealth between white people and black people is, how can you say it isn't race when the disparity between white people and black people is like 93% or whatever? And I was like, yeah, I know the census data. Like, you're leaving something out. Like, it goes black, and then it goes white, and then it goes like 9 other ethnicities. And it's like, brown, yellow, green. Like, there's all the other ethnicities are above white. Like Caucasian, see, Lila's doing it. So Caucasian is like at the bottom of the list. There's like all these other ethnicities, Lila Bear. So there's all these other ethnicities above that. And the thing that connects all of them, the reason that black and white are at the very bottom, when I was trying to analyze like why the census data, all these average yearly thing, the one thing I could see with all of these families above is that all of those ethnicities have a very, whatever their culture is, and they're from all over, either it's China, or it's Japan, or it's Korea, or it's India, or it's oh gosh, it's just all these different, or Catholic, or whatever their ethnic backgrounds in America are. I was like, the one thing I finally figured it out, because I talked it out on Twitter, was the family. Like, and I was like, oh, that's why they're conservatives and leftist debates. I haven't seen them say that. I've never seen them brought up the census data about all the other colors in America, because they trump both white and black. And what they have is a hardcore family unit. They really push forward the family unit, and it shows in their wealth. So it reflects when I talk to families. When you talk to parents, I see that when I talk to parents all over America and all over the world, they say, like, we want to push our culture forward, or we want to push our faith forward, or we want to push our values forward, and all these sorts of things. And that's what they're worrying about when they want to raise their children. They're really worrying about, oh, do they have our values? Or are they going to, have this, or are they not going to have our values? Are they going to want whatever religion? Like, are they going to be open to any religion? Which I want to say that. When you say, I want to be hands off on my kids, like, I want them to believe whatever they want to do and choose for themselves, you are literally giving them up to the culture of Hollywood. They will not choose whatever they want. I have been really learning that, my parents did that. They didn't discuss politics in the household. And I'm learning that, no, it was actually Hollywood then that taught me Hollywood then raised me. And I wasn't even allowed to watch TV in the household, but it still seeped through. Like, even just attending school, I wasn't allowed to listen to music. It still got through, and Hollywood raised me, and I had their values coming out of school. So, like, when I ran into other different, even raised Catholic, but Catholic is Democrat, right? So when I ran into any kind of other, remember the people across the street when they moved in across the street, they were evangelical, and it was a culture shock for me. I was like, big time culture shock, huge, and everything I was like, oh, how could, even though my family didn't talk politics at all. And that's because the culture raises your kids. So there's no such thing as, like, let my kid decide. It's not going to happen. Like, they will be raised. They will be raised by the education system, which is leftist, and they will be raised to Hollywood standards, and whatever you see on the Oscars is what your kids will believe. Like, you're leaving them up to the internet, you know what I mean? So I do want to say that. So, but what's always left out today that parents don't understand is that two things that this therapist told me that the parenting job is to do. And number one, a parent's job, and it's interesting, Dr. Phil said something I didn't agree with. He said, when you're a parent up to the age of 18, you dictate to children what they do. And I was like, dictate? Like, that was one heck of a way to put it. I didn't like that, dictate, but he says, you're a dick, you dictate to kids, like, and I suppose rules of the household and stuff like that. He said, but after 18, you're an influencer. Well, this is like the number one rule that I learned, and I'll put it on the board. Okay, I zoomed in a little bit. I hope you can see that. So your job after a child is 18 is you are only supposed to give your opinion to a child, or they are now an adult at 18. So as a parent, you're no longer parenting them. So you only give your opinion to your child after 18 when it is asked of you. That's it. You do not give your opinion to your child unless it is asked of you. So unless your child says, I have a question about this, I need this, or I'm wondering what you think about this, it's time for them to develop as an adult and have if you really want them to have their own independence or whatever, anything like that, if you want them to be an adult, that's it, at 18. And that is a very hard and fast rule that was genius. And I know, think about your own parents. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice if your parents only gave you their opinion when you asked them for it? we live in a very judgmental society today. In my opinion, that's the same way with your friends. Like, they shouldn't be giving you their opinion unless you ask for it. That's the problem with Facebook, and that's why it's so socialist, is because you post a thing and everyone assumes that's you asking for their opinion, and they just judge you. Instead, you're sharing the joy. Most people post because they're so happy and they want to celebrate it. People post in celebration, and instead everyone viewing it says, oh, you're asking for my opinion. And Facebook encourages that. They say, click the like button, but in reality, it's saying everybody judge. And I really think people need to start watching and reading The Crucible again, because boy, haven't we returned to that time. We used to be ashamed of our history in The Crucible. But instead, I just found out in Salem, Massachusetts, it's like the biggest thing in Boston. It's the biggest thing in like the Eastern Seaboard or whatever, is going to celebrate Halloween at Salem. And I'm like, I would think you'd want to bury that past, not celebrate it. But I guess we really have embraced lying and lynching people. I guess if they're really celebrating Salem, and like the whole Eastern Seaboard is going, or at least the whole North is going up to Salem to celebrate Halloween at the Salem witch trials, and the entire, New York to Maine goes there and celebrates it, and that's like the main event of the year. Well, I guess we can understand why Senator Warren and Bernie Sanders, all who are from there, and the Democratic Party, which is based out of there, Hillary Clinton is in Chappaquiddick, right there in New York, right next to it. I guess we can understand why, it's your truth versus the truth, which isn't that what The Crucible is all about? The Salem witch trials. Those girls decided to come up with the truth, didn't they? And so anyway, it is your job as a parent to stand back and let them make their own decisions, and you be okay with that. And you let them know at 18, I'll give you my opinion when you ask for it. And it's going to hurt, because they're not going to ask for your opinion very often. And as they get older, they'll ask for it more as they trust you more. But that brings me to number 2, because you're going to be like, but they can't live unless I give them my opinion all the time. They won't make it. And that brings me to number 2. Emotion regulation. Beyond culture, beyond ethnicity, beyond faith, in order for your child to be an adult. I told you this. One health professional, one of my favorite, the people who did boundaries, right? One of my favorite people or whatever. They said it is more important than culture, faith, religion, anything, even though they mentioned, the whole God thing through their entire boundaries book or whatever, they actually said it is more important to take care of your mental health. They said mental health, then your religion. They said mental health, then faith. And then whatever, I don't remember or whatever. I thought that I was which is part of the reason that I was I love that book so much. It was just so common sense. So we might need to do an episode on it or whatever. So again, no one's really sent me anything that matches up psychology-wise. I really can't wait. There's been some things, but it's all like pieces, like one chapter. I'm like, let's a framework, or at least the core of it, explaining boundaries, the root of it. So, but I saw that the new release talked about that. I couldn't believe the first sentence. It wasn't in it when I read it years ago. And it just said, the heart of man longs to be free. And I was just like, oh yeah, definitely have to share it. Okay, great. So the heart of man longs to be free. Oh wait, that's something else. Ah, shoot, I thought it was, I'm blending books now. Way to go. So anyway, so this is, they need to be able to regulate emotions. So emotion regulation, what does that mean? So I think this is a perfect example. If it means emotional maturity and ability to When they feel an emotion, does it knock them off center? When an emotion comes up, if emotion is triggered, do they go screaming off, or are they able to rock solid handle it? So here's an excellent example. So if you're I saw this once in a computer lab, and I was visiting a friend, and we were in a computer lab, and this the guy that headed up the computer lab, the director, came in, and he was the supervisor of another guy that was working in the computer lab, and he got pissed. Like, this wasn't my friend, thank goodness, but he got pissed at the guy underneath him, and he yelled at the guy, and the guy, like this guy that was actually like a director of this computer lab, just welled up, ran into the hall and just started sobbing, right? And I heard later that that guy was like, I don't want my kid to ever like lose it. I don't want my kid to ever lose it like that and cry because somebody yelled at them. And what I realized is that's like startle response. They got startled and they welled up and they started crying. And so then they started startling their kid all the time. Huh! Like they'd be playing with their kid. Oh, nice. Da, da, da. And then they go, oh, and oh. Like that's grounds to remove a kid from the house. And the poor kid just like, I remember the pictures changed because there would be like all these things. They had this whole group of the computer lab people, and I get sent the parties to be like, haha, we're here or whatever and stuff. And I'd see like this kid change. It was awful. It was awful to watch. You know, it was awful to watch. Healthy kid turned white as a sheet, turned eyes puffy, you know, because now that kid, you know, because this one guy, whoever his parent, I have no idea his family history or whatever and stuff like that, but whatever it was, he couldn't handle startle. His emotion trigger was startle. He got scared, or maybe it was anger, whatever it was, he felt it. He couldn't handle it, and he burst into tears. And now he's passing it on to his own kid and startling his own kid, and now his kid can't regulate it. His kid can't regulate startle. Now, I know you've met some people. I have another friend. I have all these friends. So I have another friend where no matter what I did, no matter how often I try to jump him, just nothing. Just like, no scaring this guy. No scaring this guy. No, I don't know what's with him. I don't know if he's a psychopath or whatever. So like just zero scaring this guy. Just rock solid. Nothing. Of course, older generation or whatever. Maybe that's what it is. But I mean, his feet were like into the ground as if there was something tying him to the center of the earth, and he was just like pulled there, and there was a tension rod, and there was just like no moving him. There's this massive tension rod to the core of the earth. That's what you need to do. Not that it needs to be that much. I mean, most people start jump or whatever like that. I remember my mom. Oh my gosh. I remember I was in her classroom once or whatever like that, and a janitor came in, and she didn't see him. She was working in the classroom, and he was like, oh, Miss da-da-da, and she just went, blah, 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 and she jumped up and she turned around like this, blah, 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 and she just waved her hands like this. And I was like, yeah, like that. I just was like, what's wrong with mommy? You know, and it's emotion, how you handle it. Should be a jump, but not a jump to where you're dancing and screaming, you know, in the air. And now we have a thing on college campuses where, you know, kids can't handle a word. They can't regulate a single word. And I know you hear things on the news and calling kids cupcakes and all this sort of thing. But your child, really what they're talking about, they talk about trigger warnings and all this. What we're really talking about is the effects of this degeneration we've seen on society. And even a leftist magazine, I believe it was, I need to find it again, not Scripted or something. It's in the UK. I really love it. And I'll try and find the video and link it here. I really love the guy. He's so amazing. He does an amazing magazine. And he called it out. He's like, this isn't a political movement. This is literally an unraveling of society. We've gone back to like the dark ages where people are just animalistic. And I was like, yes, you're right. He's like, we're dehumanizing. Like the children are they're becoming dehumanized. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what's happening. Like they're going to like this subhuman, like emotional, where all the emotions are just raw and they can't regulate a single emotion. Your job as a parent is to help your children learn how to regulate their emotions. How do you do that? Well, we start by actually learning what the emotions are. Let me help you out with that. All right, I'm so excited to show you this. This is one of my favorite wheels in the entire world of psychology. So you guys are like, oh yeah, she really is the PhD. What is she doing? So I know I want to get out of this angle. So anyway, this is like my favorite tool. I used to use it all the time in the consulting that I did. So I love it so much. It really helps so much. Wait till you guys see it. So this is called, I don't even know if I say it right, Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. And it's so helpful. So at any one time, this is the best wheel of emotion chart I've ever seen. Well, it's the only wheel of emotion chart, but everyone out there is like, oh, there are all these different emotions, happy, sad, glad, you know. But in my opinion, this is the best and most on point, and with all the people I've used it with and groups I've used it on, this always rings true, solid. It's just all the way through. It's the one that works. So, and even with people that I've had to counsel in my life, just when you do things like addiction and stuff like that, you end up helping others. It totally helps. So, at any one time, you feel 3 emotions. Like if you really check yourself and really try to feel internally, you're usually feeling 3 emotions at one time. If you're like in touch with yourself, or if you're really paying attention, or if you're mature at all, or you know, if you're developed, then you usually feel about 3 emotions at one time if you really check it out. So here we go. These are the basic emotions, are the one right here in the middle of the petals. So I'm going to zoom you in a little bit more. This is my version of zooming. Lila, you're going to have to move your butt. I'm serious. She was bad today. She was another naughty girl. So I'm kind of like not in the mood. She's trying to be flirty and I'm not in the mood. I'm like, no, you're not in the mood. All right. So we have like, let's see here. So we have the basic, these are the basic, I printed this up for you guys, just for you guys. I didn't have this around before, so I lost all my stuff before in the move, and so this is what I printed up just for you guys. So I hope that you like it. So these are the basic petals. So joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. Now here's the way it works, is that on each petal, you can sometimes feel this emotion, joy. You can feel it strongly, and when you feel it strongly, it feels like ecstasy. And when you feel it just a little bit, it feels like serenity. Now here's where it becomes amazing, and I really think you'll love it. So when you work with like abused women, or you work with people that are in relationships, or like when you talk to your children about relationships, or if you're trying to figure out if you're in an abusive relationship, here is like the amazing way this wheel can help. So if you're feeling the emotion, when you're in that relationship and you feel the emotion of joy and you're feeling the emotion of trust, those two come together and that feels like love. If you just feel serenity and acceptance, that's just like, oh, you may be just beginning to be in love, or maybe you're kind of, but it's a form of love, or maybe it's what you feel for your aunt or your cousin or something like that, just a mild form of love, right? Okay, so if it's ecstasy and admiration, we both know what kind of thing you're doing when you're here, right? Okay, so anyway, let's just say, yes, the injections are good. Very good. Thank you, doctors. So, but when you get here, trust and fear, when you have fear and trust, right? So this is very different. Then if you trust the person, but it's the petal of fear, that's actually submission. That's not love. And so a lot of young girls and even young men think that when there's they think submission is love, but really it's the petal of fear and trust. So when they have trust and fear together, that's actually submission. And that's when you know that you're in a cult, because there's the feeling of fear and trust, but there's no joy there. And that's why these are so separated, because they're not anywhere near each other. When fear is here, it's very hard to be feeling joy. That's a rare thing. Usually the 3 things you're feeling are separate from each other. They're nowhere near each other on the actual petal. So It's a fascinating thing. So usually you're feeling either it strongly or you're feeling it in the middle, and you can be feeling anywhere on all of these things. So like here's anger. And so when you're feeling it just a little bit, it's annoyance. When you're feeling it very strongly, it's rage. That's why, having the names to all of these things are so important, especially when you're talking through relationships with your partner or with your kids or with your grandparents, things like that. Knowing these things like grief, sadness, pensiveness, amazement, surprise, distraction, knowing all these things like fear, apprehension is actually fear. When you feel apprehensive, that's actually, a form of fear. That's telling you that, when you're feeling just a little bit of apprehension, that means fear is in play, and it's just a lighter form of terror. And also be very aware that fear and surprise are together. That's a sense of awe. And so this is extremely, extremely helpful, okay? But the bottom line for parents is that you need to know what all of these emotions are, so that if your child feels these, if they get a feeling of disgust, or if they get a feeling of anger, or if one of these is triggered at any point in time, they're able to handle it by the time that they are 18. That is your goal as a parent, is that by the age of 18, your kid can feel one of those emotions, and you can look that up on the internet. Let me get out of the way. So by the age of 18, your kid should be able to be hit with one of those emotions by confrontation. Someone should be able to yell at them, which means if someone yells at you, usually you feel surprise, right? You feel absolute surprise. You also feel fear, right? And then you also feel anger, right? If someone yells at you, you feel surprise, fear, and anger. Can they regulate that? Now, let me give you an example of a way of helping your kid regulate it. So let's say that your kid falls, or they get a boo-boo on their knee. Let's say they scrape their knee. Do you go down and hug them and go, everything's okay? What you do, one of the ways you can help them regulate it, is you put your hand on their knee, and then you put it on their knee, and then you go send it out into space, right? You go, I'm sending it out. So let's say I get a boo-boo on my hand, right? And stuff, like you kiss it. That's why we used to kiss the boo-boos, because the parent was like that was actually a form of emotion regulation. The way we used to love our kids, it was in us, ingrained in us, are the culture that we had and the things that we did, whether we knew it or not. The scientists knew it. It was a form of emotion, helping our kids regulate their emotions. And we don't do it anymore because we're kind of wrapped up in our own world and our own phones. And so kids, when they get bumps or bruises, you see it all the time on fail videos. If a kid gets a bump or bruise, the parent is back there laughing at the kid getting the shot and not helping the kid learn to emotionally regulate what they're feeling inside. So number 2, this is like gold, gold, gold. So please donate, because this is worth like 10 counseling sessions. So at $140 pop, thank you. Please give a donation down below. Donation down below. PayPal easy. You get to set the donation amount. So this is gold. So the best way to help emotionally regulate your kid and help them learn to emotionally regulate is what's called mirroring. So if you have like a baby and your baby's crying, right? And your baby's like, oh, wah, wah, wah. You look back, wah, 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 and they see it mirrored on your face. So that's why when a baby goes, and you go, oh, that's why we used to do that. And now this new society that's trying to like dissolve us, this unfortunately Nazi agenda that they've introduced into our schools and into the mass media that's dissolving us at the base level. What they're doing is they're teaching us that when your kid goes, you go, don't be sad, be happy. That totally throws the kid off, and it just, whatever they're feeling, it teaches them to shove down, and that takes root and destroys them from within, which is exactly what these cultures want. They want our kids to be totally unhealthy. So our job as parents is to actually like reflect. I mean, I'm not pregnant or anything, that can't happen, but I'm saying, like, I've just worked with kids so much, and I have so much training that I'm saying, your job as a parent, our job as parents as a society is to mirror kids like what they're feeling. And it's the same thing when we communicate with our spouses and our loved ones when they're going through a painful time. If you read Dr. Burns' book, The Feeling Good Handbook, which is he did the new mood therapy in the 70s, which was basically how you can do depression, like be cured of depression without any meds at all, which he's right, you can. He gives amazing, I put it on my reading list. You can if you follow those things, but it's a really dense book. So you can do like 10 days to self-esteem if you want to. It's a bigger book. Always try to get a printing before 1992. Please, please get a vintage printing before 92. So they really messed up that book afterwards. It's like Agenda 21. They have chunks missing. It's awful. So, but he also did another book about communicating, couples communicating, or just communicating with relatives, how to actually talk with each other. And in that book, he really was like, when you're talking and you're in intense discussion with someone, be like, did I hear you correctly? Is this what you said? Like they talk, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, before you respond, say, like, so you're saying, and see if you got it right. Like if you're in a couple that's fighting a lot, see if you got it right. That's a form of mirroring. And then they'll be like, no, actually, I was saying this. And they'll repeat it. And you would be amazed at what you will accomplish as a couple, as a family, if you just make sure you're hearing each other correctly. Because that breaks down all the filters that you have. Just like we talked about in the alcoholic system, we have filters. So, and that amazing video we saw from that girl who was a feminist activist for 10 years, and she still, loves women's rights, but she went and did a film, and she said, I learned I wasn't listening to anyone else. She's like, I was dehumanizing them. So I'd sit there and I'd hear them, and everything they'd say, I'd be like, yeah, but, and then she'd add on like 6 sentences that they didn't say in order to discount them. And so that's why it's so important to say back to them, is this what you're saying? And you'll find out if you actually heard them correctly. And so it's something I naturally do with my friends. I can't help but do it. And it's one of the reasons my dinner parties will go so late, or if I'm on a cruise, will be the last one, because I love to make sure that I'm hearing everyone correctly, because then I do things like this that do so well. Because I really heard people around the world, from all over the world. When I went out there, I really heard all of them and what they're saying. Now my people, all my friends and stuff, they're kind of in very specific industries. But that's what I loved about traveling, is that I met people from every freaking kind of industry. And I knew how important that was. And I really wanted to hear what they had to say. I really wanted to hear it. I knew every single person's experience. Let me give you a very good example of that. So my husband and I had just come back from this really, really huge trip, and we went to Queen Mary in Long Beach. And they had just added a Russian sub, and we went into that Russian sub, and there was and we had learned this by then on our travels, and there was just this little old man, white hair, really stringy or whatever, and he was supposedly supposed to be the guide. I don't know. He was sitting there wearing a suit, and people were walking by him, and everyone had paid these extraordinary prices to go on this Russian submarine sitting next to the Queen Mary and what used to be the Spruce Goose or whatever, and he's just like walking by or whatever, or maybe the Spruce Goose was still there. I don't know. I don't remember. So, but he was like going by, and all these people were just walking by. Now, we had learned by then, never ever, if there's somebody sitting there, talk to them. Be like, you're here for a reason. You're obviously here to tell stories. What story do you have to tell us? And he had clearly been like, nope, you really don't want to listen to me. And we were like, no, we really do want to listen to you. And he's like, no, I've learned. Like, people just don't want. And we were like, no, really. And I had to pull out like my boss stuff because I've worked with his generation a lot. And I just was like, I just sat there and I was like, really? And because I was interested. And he was stationed in the Bay of Pigs. During the Cuban Missile Crisis. And as I sat there and listened to him speak, and it was so amazing because as he started to tell a story, more and more people stopped to listen. But there are these other families with kids that just walked on by, and I was like, why'd you pay for the sub? You're not learning anything about the sub. You have to learn to listen, and you start with your own family and make sure you're hearing what they're saying and be like, is that what you mean? Like, always repeat back and be like, oh, was it like this? Or was it like this? Was it like that? Because, man, the stuff you learn. And then that's the stuff that gets you the job, because networking is everything. I saw a kid on Dr. Phil, and they said he wanted to be a rapper. He wanted to be a rapper. I'm thinking about doing a video on how to be a star, because if no one's going to tell you. was like, you know what? No one on YouTube is telling you how to be a star. Dr. Phil's giving you a little bit of an insight, but this kid wanted to be a rapper. And the guy was like, do you know what it takes to be a rapper? What's the number one skill you need to make it in the rap industry? And the kid was like, writing. You need to be a writer. And the guy was like, you don't know anything. He's like, networking. And I was like, and the kid was literally like, what's networking? Networking is having the ability to stop and talk and ask questions and hold a conversation with anyone you meet. And talking to your kids like that and mirroring their emotions and giving them emotional regulation is what makes them comfortable going out into the world and talking to anyone. That's what will make them successful on Wall Street. That's what will make them successful. That's what will make them alert to when somebody is dangerous approaches. They're so emotionally regulated that they can feel the fear. They feel when apprehension comes, and they are so solid that they know what to do and they think through it because they're not. When I say emotionally regulated, that means the emotions don't overwhelm them and take them off center so that they can't think clearly and critically. They can feel the emotions and they can still be themselves and think clearly and make clear decisions no matter what emotions they're feeling. That's emotion regulation. And that's your job. Your number one job as a parent is to raise your child to be able to regulate their emotions, all of these emotions, no matter when they feel them, by the age of 18. And you do that by mirroring, by taking their pain, throwing it away, and just making sure that no matter who they meet, let them meet other people and get them used to standing like Bambi. Born, nudge them out, let them go into the world, guide them, guided practice, things like that. Madeline Hunter, use that. Let them go out to the world and let them get stable on their own 2 feet so that you can let them go out there and slay the bad guy if they come, run when they need to, but when they see a friendly, they can actually sit there and talk, and no matter what that person says to them, they can think clearly and make sound decisions without being knocked off center. That's your number one job as a parent. And when they do that, all your other things, your values, your religions, etc., they will encompass those and hear you so much more if you give them this gift. Because otherwise, they'll always be a slave to their emotions. Always. I'm Book of Katherine. I hope that helped. Please donate down below. PayPal link is down below. It would really, really help out. And I love you so much. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye. Look it up. Google it. Look for this one because some people are screwing around with it. Don't screw around with it. Go with the one that looks like this. There's like only 1 or 2 out there. This is the one you want. Yeah? That's the one you want. Love you guys. Bye.